Today you're going to be learning about factoring x squared plus bx plus c. This is a trinomial in the form of x squared plus bx plus c. It can be factored as the product of two different binomials. So when we are looking at these polynomials, what we're trying to figure out is, okay, I want to figure out what two binomials, when I FOIL them, are going to create this trinomial. So the first thing you have to look at is actually the signs in the polynomial. So we're going to do 1, we'll do 4, and then we'll do 7. And you'll see the difference in the binomials. So in number 1, I always start like this. In number 1, you have x squared plus 7x plus 10. What that tells me is that since there's a plus sign here and a plus sign here, that the two binomials have to be plus, plus. That's the only way to get a positive value here. And when I multiply my lasts, a positive value there. When I say multiply my lasts, it says here, to find the lasts of the binomials, you must find two numbers that are the product of the C term, so the product of this last term, and the sum of the B term. So they must multiply to get this term, but add to get this term. So my first term in both binomials is simply going to be x and x. That's the only way, if I FOILed this back out, if I did x times x, to get this x squared. So now I have to think, what two factors of 10 add together to get 7x, but multiply to get 10? Those would be 5 and 2. They add to get 7, but multiply to get 10. So I just put 5 in one of them and 2 in the other. So then I can check myself by FOILing. And I do my firsts, so x times x, that's x squared. My outers, so x times 2, that's 2x. Inners, 5x, so 2x plus 5x is 7x. And then my lasts, 5 plus 2 is 7. Or is 5 times 2 is 10. So it goes right back to the beginning there, right back to that original. So when I look, let's get rid of all that. At number 2, I say to myself, okay, it's plus plus. So this has to be plus plus. To get y squared, just with a coefficient of 1, it has to be y times y, because y times y will give me y squared. So now I have to take the number 8, and I have to say, okay, what two numbers multiply together to get 8? So I can get, when I multiply my lasts, I'll get that last term of 8, but add together to get 6y. And you'll know that that's 4 and 2. So I can put 4 here and 2 here. It doesn't matter which one you put where. I can check myself by saying y times y is y squared. Y times 2 is 2y. 4 times y is 4y. So 2y and 4y make that positive 6y. And then 4 times 2 is 8. So I know I'm right. So when you look down here at this next one, you'll notice that, and we're going to skip number 3. You'll notice number 4, the middle term is negative, but the end term is positive. The only way to get that is with a negative and negative. Because if you think about it, they have to multiply together to get a positive, but add together to get a negative. So I know the first term has to be w and w. That's the only way to get a w squared when I do w times w. So I need to think about the number 3, and I need to think about two numbers, two negative numbers, that multiply together to get 3, but add to get 4. And that's going to be negative 3 and negative 1. When I multiply negative 3 times negative 1, I get positive 3, so that gives me this term. When I add them, I get negative 4, so that gives me this term. So negative 3, negative 1. That's Hunter. So when I FOIL this back out, I'll get the w squared minus 3w minus 1w gives me the minus 4w. And then negative 3 times negative 1 gives me a positive 3. So in the next one, I know it's a minus in the beginning, in the middle term, and then a positive at the end. So that means it has to be minus minus for the binomials. to get just a 1n squared, it has to be n times n. Now I have to take the number 35, and I have to figure out what two factors of 35, multiply to get 35, but add to get 12. So if you think about it, you have 7 times 5. So it'll be -7, -5. -7 and -5 add together to get a -12, and multiply together to get that positive 35. So this whole last set, you'll see, like 7 through 12, you'll see that one is positive, one is negative. The last term in every single one of these is a negative. So sometimes your middle term is positive. What this means is that the binomials, one will be positive and one will be negative. These are a little more challenging to figure out. The ones up top, when it's positive, positive, or negative, negative, they're easy to figure out. But these, you have to figure out the combination that's going to give you that positive 4 and a negative 21. So we know it's going to be x and x, the first terms. But you have to think of the factors of 21 that multiply to get negative 21, but add together to get a positive 4. The first one that comes to my mind is 7 and 3. So I think about the number 21, and I think, okay, well, I know 3 times 7 gives me 21, and I know if one of them was negative, when I subtract the two, I'm going to get that 4. But I have to figure out which one has to be negative, which one has to be positive in order to get a positive 4. Well, the 7 would have to be positive, the 3 would have to be negative when I add together to get a positive 4. In these down here, it's important which one you put with the plus and which one you put with the minus. So I need the 7 to be positive and the 3 to be negative. So I can check and make sure I'm right. So x times x gives me x squared. And then I'll go all the way out. X times negative 3 gives me negative 3x. Inners, 7 times x gives me a positive 7x. Lasts, 7 times negative 3 gives me a negative 21. And you see when you put these two together, that will give you that positive 4x. So it's kind of like a puzzle. Let's skip over to, how about number 9? So you have negative, negative here now. So the only way to get that negative term in the end here is that one binomial is positive, one binomial is negative. I know the first value has to be v and v. That's the only way when I multiply my first to get v squared. Now I think of the number 20. There's a couple different factors of 20. You have 2 and 10, you have 5 and 4, you have 20 and 1. I have to figure out which two would add together to give me 1, well, negative 1. And the only factors that are close enough for that is the 5 and the 4. So I know one has to be 5 and one has to be 4. I have to have a negative 1. So I have to have a greater negative value. That means the 5 has to be negative, the 4 has to be positive. So the 4 has to go with the plus, the 5 has to go with the minus. And now I can check myself. V times v gives me that v squared. V times negative 5 is negative 5v. V times positive 4 is positive 4v. Positive 4 times negative 5 is negative 20. Oop, ran out of room. That's a 20. Negative 5 and a positive 4 give me that negative 1v. So now we can solve equations by factoring. The one thing that I kept saying is that most students forget to set the equation equal to 0. So that's what we have to do. We have to put everything on one side. Always remember, keep your highest exponent positive. So for number 13, I'm going to add 6 to both sides. So add 6 and add 6. What that's going to give me is x squared plus 5x plus 6 equals 0. Now I'm going to take that first piece here. I'm going to take x squared plus 5x plus 6, and I'm going to factor it. So it's plus plus, which means that my two binomials are plus plus. And remember to always set it equal to 0 down here too. In order to get just an x squared, it's x times x. The two factors of 6, when added together, give me 5. You have 6 and 1, you have 2 and 3. Well, it's 2 and 3 that are going to add together, since they're both positive, to get the 5. So now I factored my trinomial here. And I have my two binomials, so I know x plus 2 equals 0, x plus 3 equals 0. So x can be -2 and -3. Okay, so in number 15, this one here, you want to get everything to the same side that the h squared is. So I would subtract 16h from both sides. So I get 0 equals h squared minus 16h minus 36. So here we see that we have two negatives, which means the only way to factor this is that one is positive, one is negative. So it's h and h. So now you have to think to yourself, all right, so 36. I think, well, I'm thinking 9 and 4, but that's not going to get me to -16. I'm thinking 12 and 3. We're getting a little closer, but that's still not going to get me to -16. So the other factor of 36 that I think of, so I'll take my 36 and I say, oh, okay, well, 18 and 2. 18 and 2, I know that they're going to multiply to get to 36, and if I subtract them, because that's what I have to do when I have that negative in the middle term, I will get to a 16. So I just have to figure out which one is positive, which one's negative. Since it's -16h, that means I need a greater negative than the positive, so 18 has to be negative, and the 2 has to be positive. So here we're going to see that h is equal to -2 and positive 18. All right, it says down here, find the dimensions of the polygon with the given area. To do this, the area of this rectangle is 22 square feet. To find the area of a rectangle, you do length times width. So we're literally going to do x minus 3 times the quantity of x plus 6. So that's going to equal 22. A lot of students will say, oh, okay, well, x is 3 and x is -6. Well, it doesn't work like that because you have it set equal to 22, not 0. So you actually have to FOIL this out. So x squared minus 3x plus 6 gives me a plus 3x. And then minus 18 equals 22. From here, I'm going to set the entire thing equal to 0. So subtract 22 from both sides. So I'll get x squared plus 3x minus 8, 9, 10, 40 equals 0. Positive and negative, that means that it is going to be x plus something, x minus something is going to equal 0. So I have to start thinking of my factors of 40. I think of 4 and 10. I think of 8 and 5. Ooh, 8 and 5. There it is. So 40, break it down, 8 and 5. When I multiply 8 and 5, I get 40. When I subtract them, I get 3. Positive 3. So that means that I need it to be a greater positive in this one. So 8 has to be positive, 5 has to be negative. So it's going to go like this. So when you have this now we're going to set it equal to 0. I have my two binomials. I'm going to set them equal to 0. So x plus 8 equals 0. Oops, that's equals. X minus 5 equals 0. X will equal -8. X will equal 5. There is only one value for this problem. The value is going to be a positive 5. When you go back through here and you see you have an actual rectangle, and if I plug -8 in for x, -8 here and -8 here, I would get a 8, 9, 10, 11, a -11 feet and a -2 feet. That doesn't make sense because our feet can't be negative. So the actual only answer for number 16 is this positive 5. So it's going to be an 11 by 2 rectangle. So the key thing to remember when trying to factor a trinomial is what are going to be inside my binomials here. Is it plus, plus? Is it minus, minus? Or is one positive and one negative? These yield a positive last term. This always yields a negative last term. It's the middle term that's going to depend on whether it's plus plus, minus minus, or plus minus.